Paraguay proved once again that having the ball at this World Cup is completely meaningless, and with only 24% possession were able to shut down Germany and pick up an historic win to make it through to the last 16. The low block is something of a phenomenon this World Cup, and we've seen how it can drastically narrow the gap between the biggest footballing nations in the world and smaller countries that want to go as far as possible. In my last video we covered all the details of what makes a low block so difficult to break down. But Paraguay proved that there's more than one way you can set up to limit the opponents. Their shape completely closed off the centre of the pitch. They constantly forced Germany into tricky spaces out wide and were extremely aggressive as soon as they tried to break forward. In fact, in my last video I stated how nearly every team in a low block plays with a lone striker, as it's easier to then have more players in midfield and limit any progression from the opponents. But I obviously must have missed Paraguay, as their 4-4-2 was just as if not more effective at limiting the right areas. The game plan from Paraguay was clear right from the start. If Germany were trying to play out from the back, then they were going to press aggressively and try and rush a long ball. If, however, they weren't able to regain possession, they would then shift into a mid-block around midfield, again trying to quickly close down the centre-backs and force play out wide. What made their low block so effective was that it was a mix between zonal and man marking. The defensive line was clearly in a more zonal setup, along with the strikers attempting to shadow mark any player in midfield. But the midfield was not a clear line of four. They would drop and push up depending on the rotations from the German players in the centre, meaning Paraguay's shape was fluid and would adjust accordingly depending on where the players were in that moment. We can see this here early on in the match, how the defense is in position in a 4v4. The strikers are attempting to jockey the defenders, so essentially in a 3v2. But the midfield line is staggered, closing down all three of Germany's midfield and essentially having this 4v3 advantage throughout the match. So while Germany had the advantage while they were building the attack, it was going to be very difficult for them to find a free player further forward. But eventually, as Germany held the ball, Paraguay would reform their shape just outside their own box. This is where their formation would alter quite significantly based on what Germany wanted to do. But with two forwards, it made it nearly impossible to play through the centre. So play would shift into these pockets out wide. From here, the winger would push forward to close him down. The striker would step down to close off a pass into the middle, and on the opposite flank, the winger would follow Germany's fullback, essentially shifting the formation consistently from a 4-4-2 to a 5-4-1 or even a 5-3-2. But regardless of the shape, the priority was always to not allow play through the middle. Whatever moment you choose from this game, there is never a simple pass for Germany to make through the centre. The midfield and defensive lines are extremely compact. The midfielders are being man-marked in this central zone, and even if the ball moved out wide, they would rotate quickly to form a wall to stop anything going into this central space. And because there was no way of moving through the middle, play would shift out wide. But one principle that is absolutely crucial for a low block to work effectively is to ensure play can't move into the half space or into any pocket behind the fullback, as from here any cutback or low driven cross into the box can be extremely difficult to defend against. So Paraguay always had an extra player, either one of the two midfielders or one of the centre backs ready to follow any run into this space, and Germany never found a free player in this area either. But even if Germany were able to move the ball into these positions out wide, the problems weren't just being caused by Paraguay, and their players just weren't up to the task. Leroy Sané was essentially never able to beat his man on the right, and the two midfielders struggled to break the lines consistently and find players on the defensive line. The only player who I believe had a semi-decent game for Germany in attack was Florian Wirtz, who was able to at least create some chances for Havertz that we'll look at later on. So when Germany had the ball in these positions, they would very slowly shift it from side to side, with not much movement away from their starting positions. Now, breaking down a low block is no easy task, but if you're a coach, then maybe Saideline can help you find the right exercise for your training session. I've recently partnered with Saideline and I really like the idea behind what they're building. Essentially, Saideline allows you to quickly generate the exact training session you need with a specific focus on the principles you want. You can choose what age group, what type of session, and how many players are involved to generate exactly what you need, and it will give you a full session plan in seconds you can use with your team. Then you can either edit these sessions and add whatever information you want, or download them as a PDF ready to use. Saideline are still growing and they're looking for users that can help them improve the product. So if you want to give it a go, then you can get 20% off with code META at checkout. And they're also from Germany, so you definitely cheer them up if you check them out today. Anyway, back to the video, and for the first 40 minutes or so, Germany weren't able to create a single threatening opportunity. But at the same time, Paraguay weren't able to get forward on the counter at all, and Germany's rest defense was doing exactly what it needed to do. So the game was essentially a stalemate, and it didn't look like Paraguay were going to find the space they needed to create anything dangerous going forward. But finally, a long ball from the centre back, and Almiron was able to accelerate past the fullback and win Paraguay a corner. From here, they win the loose ball, move it out wide again to Almiron, and with a brilliant dummy and pass into the overlapping Garladza, Paraguay break into the box and find Enciso completely unmarked who finishes off the move. So while this goal did come against the run of play, if you look at possession for example, Paraguay were in control in terms of their defensive discipline, and they were able to limit Germany to pretty much nothing in the first half. So going into the second half, it was clear that Nagelsmann had to make some changes. One of the biggest problems from the first half was that they weren't able to create overloads anywhere, and by keeping a consistent back three, Paraguay found it pretty easy to cover all players in attack. But in the second half, we instantly saw a change in the role of Kimmich. Nagelsmann decided to start pushing him further forward into midfield, instead of always keeping to a more defensive position as the fullback on the right. This did allow Germany to push Paraguay even further back on the pitch, and Kimmich did have space to cross from this pocket on the edge of the box. But generally speaking, crosses from this area are still quite straightforward to defend against, as the back four are already set up. But they were starting to get closer and closer to Paraguay's box. Eventually, Germany were able to find a goal thanks to an excellent delivery from Wirtz finding Havertz, who flicks it past the keeper. Again, when playing in a low block, there are certain areas you have to simply accept the opponents will be able to cross from. And this area outside the box is one that is very difficult to stop the actual delivery. But usually you have the defense set up in a way that can intercept this cross. But here, the centre-back Canale was caught out of time with Havertz able to get there before him, and all of Paraguay's hard work was now undone. Except it wasn't, because Paraguay kept defending in the exact same way, and the only way Germany were able to break into the box were with these crosses from outside the area. The biggest chance again falling for Havertz from a Wirtz cross, but a great save from Gil was enough for Paraguay to hold on. Tactically speaking, no amount of changes for Germany changed the issues they were having in attack, and Paraguay were happy to hold on for as long as possible and take the game to penalties. Germany thought they'd clenched it in extra time with a goal from Tar from the corner, but VAR intervened after spotting a foul on the keeper. And once the game goes to penalties, then it is essentially a lottery, but these penalties were absolutely crazy. Paraguay missed 2 match points to finish off the game, before eventually Canale takes advantage of Tar's miss to send Paraguay through. And I think this game represents everything the World Cup is about, and that is that tactics, discipline and belief can overcome talent on paper. Paraguay proved once again that you don't need the ball to control a football match, and by sticking to a perfectly executed game plan, they've pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the tournament. And if the rest of the knockouts are anything like this, then we're in for something special. But what did you make of this game? It's another very early exit for Germany at the World Cup, but do you think the issues are down to Nagelsmann or the players at his disposal? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.